Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar titled Bangladesh Shrimp Sector Transitioning Towards Sustainable Growth. In this keynote session today, I, Sanjir Ali, would be presenting an overview of the Bangladeshi shrimp sector. About me, I'm a senior business consultant and project manager at LightCastle Partners, and my particular portfolio focuses on the development of Bangladeshi agribusiness and the private sector revolving around the agro value chain. To talk about the shrimp industry, we are looking at a sector that was formalized in the 1980s. The productivity peaked in early 2000s, and currently we are at a junction where we need to decide whether or not we should continue with the existing processes that we have, or do we look into developing a newer vertice for higher productivity and growth in accordance to the global demand. Now, if I talk a little about the Bangladeshi shrimp sector, the overview of it, we see that the Bangladeshi shrimp sector currently produces 56 species, of which 37 are seawater shrimps, 12 are brackish water. Now, looking at the reconciled export value, we see that for the past 8 to 9 years, we have had a significant year-on-year degrowth. And this basically is due to two major concerns. The first concern is external. With the rise of Vannamei, that is the white leg shrimp, and its availability at a lower price point, the demand for Bangladeshi export-oriented shrimp, which is popularly known as Bagda, scientifically known as Monodon, and internationally known as the black tiger shrimp, we saw a dip in the demand of black tiger shrimp in particular. This case was more prevalent in the US market as the nation mostly opted for Vannamei or white leg shrimp consumption and have more or less confined themselves from not consuming Monodon. On the other hand, the other species that is popular in Bangladesh is Rosenberg, or what we know as Golda. Golda is more for the local domestic market where we consume 70% of the total produces. And on the other hand, 30% goes for export in neighboring countries like India. What we need to keep in mind is that while the external factors with the rising demand of Vannamei played an influential role in the degrowth of the monodon demand within the global industry. However, another major challenge that we have seen in the last couple of years is the availability of wild growth. With the reducing availability, we also see a reduction in production. Hence, there has been a degrowth as well. As we know, in Bangladesh, currently there are around 24 active deep sea vessels, of which 15 or 16 of them are operational. However, the government is unwilling to provide additional license for new deep sea vessels or to further maintain the existing vessels that are inactive because of environmental concerns and the detriment that it has in aquatic bodies on the sea. Now, from there on, if we look into it, the biggest change or the biggest growth potential that we have seen is finally, after 8 to 9 years of degrowth, the Bangladeshi shrimp sector has finally seen a growth in the year 2020-21. It is partially due to the inorganic growth in the global shrimp sector after the COVID impact. But at the same time, we also think that there will be a rising demand of monodon in the coming years that may help the Bangladeshi industry. Now, from there on, if we look at Bangladesh's shrimp production, what we see is that there is a degrowth, year-on-year degrowth of 2.5% for Bagda or the black tiger shrimp. And for Rosenberg, we are looking at a 1% year-on-year dip. Now, the 1% dip is also equivalent to the reduction of arable land size in Bangladesh, which is approximately 1% per the Department of Fisheries. And this also means that if we do not transition from our traditional method of farming, which is extensive farming, and currently 95% of the farmers are relying on extensive farming, this means that we won't be able to improve our productivity, and in turn means we won't be able to fetch better export margins in the forward market. Now, looking at the Bangladeshi shrimp production overview, once again, we see that with the rising demand of Vannamei in the global market, BFRI has recently worked with MU Seafoods to pilot the production of Vannamei. Now, the results have been very optimistic to say the least. We have seen around 8,900 kg per hectare productivity in year one, and this year we're expecting around 10,000 kg per hectare. This is significantly better in comparison to our neighboring country, India, who are currently operating at 7,500 kg per hectare. Moving on, if we deep dive into the most popular shrimp species in Bangladesh, that is the monodon or the black tiger shrimp, what we see is that majority of the brood collected is still from the wild. Around 180 to 200,000 broods are collected from the wild, while imported is just 10,000 to 11,500. That means with the reducing uh, brood size collection from the wild, the industry will suffer if we do not move towards commercialized brood stock management. Similarly, the biggest problem in the farming segment that we see is that once the shrimps are farmed, if 3 to 5% of the total produce goes as wastage when it's shipped from the farm to the distributor or dealer. This is contributed because of the weak infrastructural and logistical challenge that the nation faces. From there on, inside the processing plant, what we see is that there is a wastage of around 30%. That is one third of the total production goes to wastage. And this is unutilized monetary incentives that we are not making money out of. And we think that if we can incorporate rendering and waste management and reintegrate this wastage back to the value chain through circularity, then this will result in higher yield and reduce the cost of production for Bangladeshi shrimp as well. Looking at the Rosenberg value chain, we see that it's very similar to the Monodon value chain as well. We are heavily dependent on the domestic brood supply. And what we see is that from a farming to the dealer, we are also losing out 3 to 5% due to weak infrastructural and logistical connectivity. And however, in the processing plant, we have a higher wastage ratio in comparison to the Monodon value chain. From there on, if we look at the export-oriented market, we see that the Bangladeshi shrimp industry has a degrowth in the per unit shrimp price that we are getting from the international market. This broadly can be attributed to two reasons. The first is the inconsistent quality of breeding, as we do not have specific traceability processes. And the second is the lack of knowledge among farmers to ensure productivity and to ensure sustainable highest level of outputs. Due to this, what we see is that the inconsistent weight basically devalues Bangladeshi shrimp in the international market, which leads to lower price point. Another important thing to note over here is the fact that the global shrimp market usually requires grade 16 to 30 as the highest demand. However, in the extensive farming, we are looking at grade 16 to 30 production from August to October only. That means in a year, Bangladesh is only catering or producing the global demand for 3 months due to the traditional farming method. This needs to change, and for this to happen, it is also important that we ensure access to finance to farmers, something that is not available at this moment. Additionally, there should be insurance against the production, which would allow them to formally apply for commercial loans, currently which they can't do because of a lack of collateral. From there on, if we look at the shrimp value chain cost composition, what we see is a processor makes an average of 5% margin, while a farmer can make up to 20%. However, million USD. The with the US market, as previously mentioned, is that it's a very Vannamei dominant market, and we are looking at an industry that is not willing to go for monodon or black tiger shrimp at the moment. Therefore, it's important that we need to see whether or not we should consider Vannamei production in the country. And if we consider Vannamei production, it needs to be done by experts or farms which has the expertise of handling the technology and also has the muscle power to financially capitalize on the investment. From here on, if we look at the future of Bangladeshi shrimp industry, the business attractiveness is as follows. The global shrimp industry is growing at a 4 to 5% rate, albeit a growth driven by Vannamei. Now, with the success of Vannamei piloting, we need to consider whether or not we want to proceed with Vannamei as it caters to the mass international market. Monodon or black tiger shrimp currently caters to the niche premium international market, while Rosenberg caters to the local domestic market. From here, what we can see is that we have three different species catering to three different markets. Hence, it is optimistic to assume that all these three species productions can coexist and it doesn't necessarily have to substitute one for the other. Now, the second good news or the attractiveness that we have is the GI certification to classify Monodon as a heritage product. Currently, the average price is around USD 12 per kg, but with GI certification and with proper traceability and other proper certifications, we can place Monodon as a premium product in the global market. Thirdly, as mentioned, the success in Vannamei pilot also means that we can be a part of the Vannamei bandwagon, and this is further enhanced by the fact that the Vannamei exports have been considered, or we are currently trying to export Vannamei to Dubai. Lastly, we see a slow shift in semi-intensive training for farming from traditional farming. This is because the big players can afford the necessary capital injection that is needed for the technological adoption. However, if we want to do this on a mass level, it is important that the state takes up proper regulatory and policy actions to facilitate access to finance and also to facilitate knowledge transfer so that our root level farmers can ensure better productivity. Lastly, our US market can open up as a possibility for export destination if Vannamei is commercialized. Once again, the US market, as previously mentioned, is heavily dependent on the Vannamei production. And Ecuador, being a case study, is currently taking up 22% of total US demand. That means Bangladesh also has the potential to capitalize on Vannamei production, but only if we have the right people with the right mindset and the right financial muscle power. From there on, if we look at the risks, the first thing, as we have previously mentioned, is the lack of deep sea vessels, which is a major concern. Then the value chain itself is fragmented and consists a lot of intermediaries which take up a significant share. Hence, the producers or the farm gate price is very low while the consumers are buying it at a very high price. Then there is a high incidence of disease due to limited technical knowledge of farmers and poor biosecurity. Then the frequent natural disasters such as cyclones due to the impact of climate change also makes the sector a little vulnerable. Lastly, as previously mentioned, the breeding and production due to traditional farming makes the Bangladeshi industry miss out on majority of the global demand as we are only producing it on one of the 4 quarters in a year. Thus, this is also something that can be solved through adoption of technology down the line. Now, in terms of key bottlenecks, what we see is that in the shrimp breeding segment, one of the bigger bottlenecks that we have seen is no disease screening for broodstock and low penetration of SPF hatchery. Secondly, in the shrimp farming, we see that high incidence of disease and limited access to finance as one of the major concerns, which leads to inconsistent breeding and weak negotiation power. Lastly, in the shrimp processing segment, what we see is the long value chain of intermediaries leading to poor traceability. And lastly, also the fact that lack of certifications does not help us penetrate into higher markets or also does not help us create the brand identity that is necessary to get the extra margin in the international market. From here, the way forward strategy for Bangladesh is very simple. First of all, we need to realize that Monodon, Vannamei, and Rosenberg can coexist, but Vannamei production needs to be done by specialists. Secondly, Bangladesh is currently a very HoReCa-driven industry. We need to try and tap into the retail market. For us to tap into the retail market, it is important that we increase our traceability, increase our quality, and increase access to more markets and export destinations, which would eventually mean that we will get higher profits and increased reputation in the international market. Now, the industry has once been considered as a high value export industry for the country. However, due to both natural limitations and due to the existing processes within the value chain that hinders growth and prosperity of the producers, we have seen this sector suffer for many years. Now, with the help of the government, the regulators, the association, the players, the large integrators, and also the producers, we can all collaborate work together towards the sustenance of this industry, as the leaders have said that this 400 million industry can be taken to $1 billion if the right initiatives and the right incentives are put in place. With this, I would like to end my session. I thank you all for my time, and we'd like to request you to look into the report titled Bangladeshi Shrimp Sector at the LightCastle website if you're interested to know more about the Bangladeshi shrimp industry. Thank you very much, and for any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.